So healthy soils is probably the most challenging part of starting this. What the hell is it? And I think the easiest part of a healthy soil from where I come from a consulting point of view, is to figure out the constraints that are limiting production. Dale's talk earlier touched on it. Nick's talk then gave a very good overview of some topics that I'll touch on around reducing habitat for pathogen. So that's the sort of thing that we'll be touching on today. So I'm going to give you the summary version right now, and that's really to try and encourage you to do more soil testing. I'm going to cover off a range of tests that are available for you, trying to identify constraints and then be looking with your agronomist to look at how you're going to manage them. So all I've got is a soil test to sell, so it is not a hard pitch. It's intended to inform. All right. Now, contrary to popular belief, you cannot buy soil health. Sorry to the retail agronomists in the room, but you can have a go if you want. And I think this is the slide that I often use in my presentations. This is probably what we do in agriculture, and you know, we think we've got a good grip on things, but you know, the two presentations earlier indicate how challenging it is and what's around the corner that's going to bite us. So from a soil health point of view, what I'm really looking at is trying to look at management practices that are going to be looking long term. So in terms of recovery, we're going to touch on that recovery after flooding. I'm going to touch on a couple of little things, but it's really developing a management program that's going to be looking at long-term health and sustainability of your orchard. There's a couple of fuzzy words in there that I won't go into definitions of, but that's really what we're after. Okay. In terms of a definition of soil health, I often use that one from Darren from 2012, and there's a range of indicator tests in there, or indicator values that you can be looking at to assist in making decisions around your management. Bulk density and texture, when we look at the physical components of soils, probably the most limiting two factors that we've got, which are big issues in the Goulburn Valley in respect of soil health, is compaction and pH. That we're actually not really managing them too well. And I know, you know, in Nick's presentation there, 21 pear infections that probably should have had 42 runs across the paddock with a tractor is not going to help under wet conditions. So we'll get into a little bit more of the presentation shortly about some ideas I have. Very simple. When I refer to soil health, these are the things we're all familiar with, the biology, physics and chemistry, and it's actually what we do as agronomists is really the functions that we're after. And again, I'll point to Nick's presentation was very good in respect of looking at function of digesting habitat to remove pathogen load. Right? That's the sort of thing that we need to be looking at, the function of nutrient availability, the function of disease reduction. So it's not all about getting a soil test and, you know, how much nitrogen and phosphorus do I need to put out. It's really, can we look at the white space on that test and can it tell us some other things? All right, so during a flood, we'll get a bit more topical with what we're meant to be here for today. The potential of erosion, a big risk of loss of topsoil, which is carrying nutrient off the property, and or organic matter, which is probably the thing that I get most toey about. The deposition of silt and gravel from movement of water, maybe not so much on this side of the Goulburn Valley, but certainly the other side around towards Benalla, there was a lot of movement of water. Leaching and movement of mobile nutrients. I know you won't be worried about that because you do your regular soil tests, right? Maybe. But we can be looking at following up now, and probably now is a good time as we start to pack up for the season, looking at soil testing and what we might need to top up in the tree currently to get it to look at next year, and then be starting to look at next spring's applications of products as we get into that season. Waterlogging can also raise levels of a couple of elements. So again, your regular soil test, you'll be able to review what you did last year and check those numbers. Denitrification of nitrogen, probably been interesting because once we got drying this year, with the organic matter levels that we do have across this region in our soils, we did get good mineralisation when the soils dried up. So we do have some pretty good looking trees this year. In the back of my mind is just being aware of what that might do to trees over the winter period and into next year. So I'm a little more concerned 6 months out than I am of what the trees look like this year. But with harvested fruit, we've got fruit coming off that we do tissue testing with to check nutrient removal. So we'll start to see some issues probably show up compared to our early season fruitlet samples. Okay, slaking of soils, again, a big issue in this region, and a lot of work that was done here. If you look back through the archives of DPI to Tatura, what it was to me when I grew up in this area, and certainly the work of Bruce Cockcroft and others, along quite a period of time ago, is still very relevant to the soils in this region. I just want to quickly have a look at a couple of soils and what happens, and this is certainly what has happened when we add water to these soils, the slaky soils that occur in this region. So this is that compaction that's caused by silt and clay particles moving into that surface, and then we're actually getting turbation with tractor traffic and the wheel ruts that still exist out there in the paddock. So we'll touch on that in a couple of minutes also. So important parts, and again, you're not going to get a measure on this, but should be looking at characteristics that you see as indicators in your orchard around what's going on. Where is nutrient gone? So we can do a test and have a look at that. I'm going to suggest to you that maybe subsoil testing is probably valid in many orchards in this region. We've got some of the subsoil testing that I've done recently is quite similar in some areas to the topsoil, but there's a lot of areas that are actually quite constrained for nutrition and physical and biological characteristics. So I'm going to suggest that subsoil observation on occasions to learn a little bit more about it and maybe make some better decisions is probably worthwhile. Has biology been negatively affected? I would think so. Certainly the positive guys are outweighed by the number of sick trees that we do see around, with certainly Phytophthora and Pythium presently, or certainly maybe a little earlier in the drying phase. Structure certainly we think's been affected, and traffic and have the trees and crops. And I've probably covered off that in a moment ago. Some tissue testing and making observations about what's in the fruit when we're removing it, and seeing if that corresponds with what was happening last year, and whether we should be making some decisions around nutrient applications for that. Okay, I won't go into the soil tests. I probably started off there, but I think I will make a point, and as an agronomist and with many other agronomists in the room, and as farmers that should be asking us the question, what's in the white space on that test? Because there's some numbers there, and if I've got 10 and I need 20, then I apply 10. But it's actually what's in the white space that's really going to help us make some decisions. So that's a challenge to all of us every day, I think. I think everybody's seen the slide of the teaspoon and in the media of, there's more organisms. There's more organisms in a teaspoon of soil than there are people on the planet. Well, I think we've got to get past that point. And we actually know now the functional groups of organisms that are in there. We actually know how many they are and the things that they do. And we also know a lot more about the interrelationship of organisms that are in the soil. All right, so I'm just going to give you an example. This is more commonly available nowadays. That's better. A commonly available test called phospholipid fatty acid analysis. This is a weighting of the numbers that come out of that test as part of their function in the soil. So this is done by a microbiologist, not me. I just sell the test. But this is a really handy indicator of how your soil is performing. There is no let me put to you that there is no correlation to the Goulburn Valley orchards here. So you need to do it for a couple of years to get a bit of an idea of how this is working for you. I think the easiest thing with microbiology right now is it tells you what you have done. It may not tell us enough about what we should be doing in the future around our bugs in the soil. Right, so it probably indicates really around how our management practices exist. So I'll just give you a bit more detail on that test. So that's the analysis that comes out of that phospholipid fatty acid. PLFA, if you look it up on the web, even Google's onto it nowadays. Just a note, as I told my daughter as she went through high school, there is a whole lot of information on the web. Some of it's even true. So this is a phospholipid fatty acid analysis, commonly used in research, so, but not correlated to anything that we're doing here on a daily basis. But it can help us in decisions about how we're impacting our soil and our bugs. Okay, I won't go into that because we could be here. There's people doing PhDs on that, so there could be a 3-week seminar coming up. But I think repairing surface damage, really need to be getting onto that as soon as you possibly can. And I know you've got other things to do, but as a consultant, I can walk in and tell you to fix your ruts in your mid-rows and then walk away. I'll see you in 3 weeks and we'll see if you've done it. Maybe harvesting fruit, stuff, trying to make money, but trying to get that done. What I'm going to add to that is really trying to get our favourite topic of the moment in agriculture is cover cropping. Crikeys, if you're not doing that, you're not in the game, are you? So we're trying to get root systems back, develop in and help us break up that and maintain that aggregation in the soil. Right, so we looked at that earlier slide of slaking. I think cover crops and mid-row crops and even back up under the trees, taking Bruce Cockcroft's work from years ago, trying to get root systems much more active and being managed as a part of the cropping system, not just sow and hope. But you guys wouldn't do that anyway, would you? And a range of plant types that are producing, putting different root systems into that soil profile. Okay, this one's a bit more hairy. This is research that was done in 1996 in the United States that come up with this protein called glomalin. The lab that these tests represent in Adelaide is using that glomalin as a surrogate for soil aggregation. So the more glomalin we can produce, which is a metabolite from particularly mycorrhizal fungi, as it dies, leaves that glomalin protein, and that it represents the aggregation and stickiness of making aggregates hold together in soils. Probably got some criticism of its validity. So I'll just put that out there in terms of a test. It's criticism in the research sphere about its validity, and there are other tests like that slaking test, been around. Geez, if we all haven't been to a session that's had a slake test and a dispersion test, I'll go heave. But that's this water stable aggregates is probably an area that we're going to see a lot more of, just as a handy in-paddock test that you can do and get an idea of how your soil's holding up. Just the same, again, in that white space on your soil test, you should be starting to be able to read soil tests adequately to give you an indication of what that physical nature of that soil should be like, and how to make some amendments for it. Oh God! Oh, now I've moved it over there. Jeez. I'll pick up on Nick. Nick, thanks for giving me a lead in, mate. You've done a really good job. I'll add a couple of things. Trying to get some nutrition out there. So there was research done in New South Wales a few years ago by a guy named Clive Kirkby, PhD. For every 10 tonne of stubble to produce 1 tonne of organic matter, right? You need 80 kilograms of actual N, 20 kilos of actual P, 14 kilograms of actual sulfur. So you can probably think of some products that you've got now that you should be adding in with Nick's mix of urea. Right? They're the nutrient ratio in humus, and that's what his research was on validating that if we've got those going out on our stubble, we can get that broken down. Stubble or residue of your prunings, your leaf litter, those sorts of things. Now they've also got some nutrient in them, so you can adjust your nutrient levels to that. All right, getting some liquid out. As Nick said, use your herbicide sprayer, put it to use. 3 minutes. I was hoping to go for another hour. Tree health. I think I won't make any outlandish statements about potassium phosphate, but maybe it's something that you could talk to your agronomist about. Keep looking after your trees and try and put something into your tree, because I am a little concerned about tree health as we go forward through winter, after probably some stress in the spring. So this is an indicator of how you might apply it. I don't know whether staffing numbers have improved around the region, but there may be other ways of application now. But yeah, looking at maybe something like potassium phosphate might be a handy inclusion to have a look at. That's not a written recommendation either, by the way. Up to you. If we're going to make those spray applications for nutrition, what we're looking to try and get value out of our organic matter, this is another test where you can look at particulate organic materials in your orchard and what value they might provide around trying to get organic matter back into the soil. Again, I'm not trying to flog your test. I'm trying to say there are a lot of tests out there that we don't see that might provide value to you. There's another one in this series called NWISE, which is the full biological nitrogen cycle in soil. It's another very good test.